The night was cool, the hum of streetlights buzzing faintly as Alex Carter made his way through the near-empty parking lot of the college campus. He had just finished his evening class, his backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, lost in thought. It was one of those peaceful nights where the air was crisp and the world felt quiet. But that peace was about to be shattered. A deep rumble cut through the silence, a sound that sent a ripple of unease through Alex's gut. Motorcycles, not just one or two, but several. The kind of deep, growling engines that made heads turn, the kind that carried a certain weight of menace when heard in the wrong place at the wrong time. Alex glanced up, his sharp eyes narrowing as he saw them roll in, 6 bikers, all clad in leather, their headlights beaming like predators' eyes in the darkness. They came to a slow, deliberate stop near the entrance of the lot, blocking the path Alex needed to take. He didn't recognize them, but their body language was enough to tell him they weren't here by accident. They sat on their bikes, engines idling, watching him like wolves circling prey. Alex wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but something about the way they lingered, the way their gazes followed him, made it clear. This wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. "Hey, college boy," one of them called out, his voice rough and taunting. "You got a minute?" Alex pulled out his earbuds, but didn't stop walking. He had learned a long time ago that confidence, calm, controlled confidence, was the key to handling situations like this. "Not really," he replied evenly. "Long day, just trying to get home." One of the bikers, a tall, bearded man with a scar running down his cheek, revved his engine as he smirked. "That's so. Well, see, we were just looking to have a little chat." Alex could feel the tension thickening. He wasn't some helpless college student who would freeze up at intimidation. He had spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, training in some of the most demanding conditions, pushing his body and mind beyond what most people could imagine. And on top of that, he had been practicing karate since he was 10, earning his black belt long before he even enlisted. These guys had no idea who they were dealing with. But Alex wasn't reckless. He knew that fights were unpredictable, especially when the other side had numbers. He also knew that ego was the quickest way to turn a bad situation into a disaster. So he kept his face neutral, his stance relaxed. "Look," he said, "I don't know what you want, but I don't have time for games." Another biker, shorter but stockier, with tattoos creeping up his neck, chuckled. "See, that's the problem, college boy. You don't get to decide what time it is." 2 of them dismounted their bikes, stepping forward, their boots crunching against the pavement. The others stayed put, their eyes watching, waiting. The whole scene felt choreographed, like they had done this before, like they were used to people backing down the moment they got serious. But Alex wasn't like most people. His muscles tensed beneath his jacket, his mind calculating distances, movements, exits. He had fought in situations far more dangerous than this. If things went south, he knew exactly how to handle it. But for now, he played it cool, giving them one last chance to rethink whatever plan they had in mind. "Fellas," he said, voice steady, "I'd rethink this if I were you." The bearded man with the scar laughed, stepping closer. "Oh yeah, and why's that?" Alex met his gaze without hesitation, his lips curling into the faintest smirk. "Because I'm not the guy you want to pick a fight with." For a second, just a second, something flickered in the man's expression. Uncertainty, hesitation. But then it was gone, buried beneath arrogance and bravado. He stepped even closer, close enough that Alex could see the glint of a silver ring on his finger, close enough to smell the faint trace of motor oil and cigarette smoke. And then, without warning, he reached for Alex's shoulder. That was his mistake. Because before his hand could even land, Alex was already moving. And in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Here's the continuation of your story, keeping the suspense high and deepening the tension. Alex's reaction was instant. His training took over, the years of discipline kicking in before he even had to think. With a swift pivot, he turned his body just enough to evade the bearded man's hand, making him stumble forward slightly. It wasn't an attack. Not yet. just a warning. A small movement that sent a message. Asterisk, I see you coming. I'm Rowdy asterisk. The man straightened, his face darkening, and the other bikers took notice. The air grew heavier, the silence between them stretching, thick with the kind of tension that usually preceded something bad. Alex remained calm, his heartbeat steady. This wasn't his first time dealing with guys who thought intimidation was their best weapon. But the thing about intimidation, it only worked on people who didn't know how to handle themselves. Looks like we got a tough guy, the man with the scar muttered, tilting his head slightly as he studied Alex. His fingers flexed, like he was considering his next move. One of the other bikers scoffed. Come on, man, just let him go. Ain't worth it. But the leader, Alex could tell now that's what he was, didn't move. He was too deep into this moment, too caught up in whatever point he was trying to make. Alex had seen men like him before, guys who carried themselves with the weight of experience, but also with the kind of arrogance that made them underestimate the wrong person. The man took another step forward, his boots heavy against the pavement. I don't like when people play games with me, he said, his voice lower now, almost conversational. You walked through our asterisk lot without a second thought. Didn't stop, didn't even hesitate. Alex remained still, his expression unreadable. He had no idea what this guy was trying to prove, but he wasn't about to engage in some ego-driven exchange. I didn't realize parking lots had owners, Alex said coolly. The shorter biker with the tattoos chuckled, shaking his head. They do when you're standing in the wrong one. Alex exhaled through his nose, resisting the urge to shake his head. This was a game to them, an intimidation tactic. The more he stood his ground, the more they wanted to see if he would flinch. But Alex didn't flinch. Not in boot camp, not in combat, and definitely not now. The leader's lips curled into something between amusement and irritation. He didn't like being challenged, even in the smallest way. You don't look scared, he observed. Alex met his gaze. Should I be? For a brief moment, the two men just stared at each other, a silent battle of willpower playing out between them. The rest of the group stayed back, watching closely, waiting to see what their leader would do next. The bearded man seemed to consider something, then took a slow breath. You got guts, he admitted, though his tone didn't exactly sound like a compliment. Most guys would have already made some excuse and walked away. Alex just shrugged. I'm not most guys. That made the man chuckle, though there was still an edge to it. He studied Alex a little longer, as if trying to put a puzzle together. You military? He finally asked. That question changed the energy just a little, not enough to break the tension, but enough for Alex to know he had their attention in a different way now. He didn't answer right away. He had no reason to give these guys anything, but he also knew when to use the truth to his advantage. Yeah, he said simply. The leader raised an eyebrow. Army. Alex shook his head. Marines. The shift was almost imperceptible, but Alex saw it. A flicker of something in the man's expression, not fear, but a different kind of awareness. The others reacted more visibly. The guy with the tattoos glanced at the leader, his smirk fading slightly. Another biker, still seated on his bike, let out a low whistle. Explains a lot, the leader murmured. He studied Alex again, but now with more calculation than challenge. Alex didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The leader scratched his chin, considering his next words. You ever hear of a guy named Ray Maddox? Alex's mind ticked at the name, but it didn't register. No. The leader smirked, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Interesting. The way he said it made Alex's instincts tighten. Something was going on here, something deeper than just a bunch of bikers messing with a random college student. Before Alex could ask anything, the leader straightened. Well, Marine, looks like you're not as easy to shake as most people. He turned slightly to the others, giving them a nod. Let's roll. The rest of the group hesitated for just a second before following orders. One by one, they mounted their bikes, engines roaring back to life. The leader turned back to Alex. Next time you walk through here, Keep your eyes open. You never know who's watching. With that, he swung his leg over his bike, revved the engine, and took off. The others followed, leaving behind nothing but the fading growl of motorcycles and the heavy scent of exhaust. Alex remained standing there for a moment, his jaw tight. He had the unsettling feeling that whatever just happened wasn't random. And that name, Ray Maddox, he didn't know it, but something told him he was about to find out. The roar of the motorcycles faded into the night, but the weight of the encounter lingered. Alex stood there for a moment, staring at the empty parking lot, his mind racing. Something about the way that leader, whoever he was, had looked at him in those final seconds didn't sit right. And that name, Ray Maddox *, it meant nothing to him, yet the way it was said, almost like a test, made Alex uneasy. He exhaled slowly and adjusted the strap of his backpack before walking toward his car. His instincts told him this wasn't over. He had learned to trust that feeling. It had kept him alive more times than he could count. He slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, replaying the conversation in his head. Back at his apartment, Alex pushed open the door, letting out a quiet sigh. The small space was simple, clean, minimal. He didn't need much. After years of barracks life and deployments, material things never really held much value. He tossed his keys onto the counter, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and leaned against the kitchen counter, still thinking about the bikers. He had dealt with trouble before, both overseas and back home, but this felt different. This wasn't just some random group looking to pick a fight. Curiosity gnawed at him. He pulled out his phone and typed the name into a search engine. Ray Maddox *. He wasn't expecting much, maybe a random social media account, but the results made his stomach tighten. The name wasn't just any name. Ray Maddox was tied to multiple headlines: gang activity, organized crime, suspected connections to illegal dealings all over the state. Alex scrolled through article after article, his jaw tightening. Maddox wasn't just some thug. He was a known figure in certain circles, the kind of guy who didn't just lead a gang, but controlled an entire operation. And if those bikers were connected to him, that meant tonight's encounter wasn't just about intimidation. The realization sent a cold sensation creeping through his veins. What had he just stepped into? A message notification popped up on his screen, pulling him from his thoughts. It was from his friend and former Marine buddy, Jake. Jake. Still hitting the gym early tomorrow, Alex smirked slightly, shaking his head. Leave it to Jake to keep things simple. He quickly typed back a response. Alex. Yeah. 6 a.m. If there was one person who might have some insight into this situation, it was Jake. He had a way of knowing things, always had his ear to the ground. If the name Maddox was as big as it seemed, Jake might have heard something. The next morning, the gym smelled like sweat and rubber, the familiar sound of weights clanking against the floor filling the space. Alex had always found a strange sense of peace here. It was one of the few places where everything else faded away, where the only thing that mattered was pushing past limits. Jake was already there, wrapping his hands for a sparring session. He was built like a brick wall, years of service chiseled into his frame. His dark eyes flicked up as Alex approached. "You look like you saw a ghost," Jake said, tossing him a pair of wraps. Alex gave a half smirk. "Not quite. Ran into a group of bikers last night." Jake's expression didn't change much, but Alex could see the flicker of interest. "Yeah. They were trying to size me up, I think. Kept blocking my way, waiting to see if I'd back down." Jake nodded, unbothered. "And?" Alex finished wrapping his hands before answering. "Didn't back down." Jake snorted. "Of course not." He stepped into the ring, rolling his shoulders. "So why does this feel like more than just a couple of idiots trying to act tough?" Alex climbed in after him, stretching out his arms. Before they left, the leader asked me if I'd ever heard of Ray Maddox. That made Jake pause for a second. His hands tightened around the ropes, his gaze sharpening. Ray Maddox. Alex nodded. You know the name. Jake exhaled through his nose, stepping toward the center of the ring. Yeah, I know it. Anyone who pays attention knows it. Alex frowned. How deep is he in? Jake shook his head. Deep. Organized crime, drugs, weapons, name it, and he's got his hands in it. But he's smart. Never gets caught, never leaves a trace. And if those bikers are tied to him, that means they aren't just a bunch of guys looking for trouble. They're part of something bigger. Alex absorbed that, the weight of it settling in his gut. That's what I thought. Jake studied him for a second, then cracked his neck. You plan on staying out of it? Alex hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? He had no reason to get involved. He wasn't a cop, and he wasn't in the Marines anymore. Whatever this was, it wasn't his fight. But something about the way those bikers had looked at him, the way they had tested him, told him this wasn't over. Jake seemed to read his thoughts. Look, man, I know you. You've got that itch, that need to figure things out. But trust me, Maddox isn't the kind of guy you just go poking around. Alex smirked slightly. Didn't say I was. Jake raised an eyebrow. You didn't have to. They circled each other, fists raised, but Alex's mind was still turning. He wasn't looking for a fight, but sometimes the fight found you. The next few days passed in a blur, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was subtle at first, just small things that could have been nothing. A motorcycle parked across the street from his apartment a little too often. A black truck idling at the far end of the parking lot when he left class. A lingering stare from a stranger at the gas station. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. By the third day, he knew for sure. Someone was keeping tabs on him. He kept his routine normal, not giving away that he'd noticed. If they were watching, it meant they still weren't sure what to do with him. That gave him an advantage. The best way to stay ahead of a threat was to make sure the enemy didn't know how much you already knew. That night, as he left campus, he felt it again, that presence. He walked to his car like usual, but his muscles were tight, coiled, waiting. He unlocked the door but didn't get in right away. Instead, he turned just slightly, catching movement in the reflection of his side mirror. A man. Not one of the bikers from before, but he carried the same energy, calculated, dangerous. He was pretending to be on his phone, but his eyes kept flicking toward Alex. Alex exhaled slowly, then made a choice. He closed his car door and started walking. Not home, not to his usual spots. Somewhere quiet, somewhere isolated. If they wanted to follow him, he'd give them a reason. He led them a few blocks away, to an old industrial lot, mostly abandoned at this time of night. The only light came from a single flickering street lamp. It was quiet, the distant sound of traffic humming in the background. Then he stopped. The footsteps behind him hesitated. Alex turned. The man watching him had stopped too, just a few yards away. He wasn't pretending anymore. He was facing Alex fully now, his phone gone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alex tilted his head slightly. You planning on standing there all night? The man smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're not as dumb as you look. Alex stayed relaxed, but his muscles were ready. He had been in enough situations to know when someone was here to talk and when they were here for something else. You with Maddox? Alex asked, voice calm. The man didn't answer right away. Then he took a slow step forward. You've been asking the wrong questions, Marine. That confirmed it. They weren't just watching him, they were testing him. I haven't asked anything, Alex said. The man nodded. That's the problem. Alex watched as the man's hand twitched near his waist. A weapon, maybe, but Alex didn't give him the chance to find out. He moved fast. In a single motion, he closed the distance, grabbing the man's wrist before he could reach for anything. The guy was quick, but Alex was faster. A sharp twist, a step to the side, and suddenly Alex had the man's arm pinned behind his back. Bad choice, Alex muttered. The man struggled, but Alex held firm. He could feel the tension in the guy's muscles, the frustration of someone who wasn't used to losing control. "You're making a mistake," the man hissed. Alex leaned in slightly. "Then tell me why you're following me." The man clenched his jaw but didn't answer. Alex tightened his grip just enough to make a point. "I don't like games." There was a brief pause, then the man let out a slow breath. "You got their attention. That's all you need to know." Alex frowned. "Who's asterisk they asterisk?" The man hesitated, but before he could answer, the sound of an engine echoed through the lot. Headlights cut through the darkness, blindingly bright. Alex reacted on instinct. He shoved the man away, stepping back just as the vehicle skidded to a stop. The doors flew open. More men, more trouble. Alex's pulse stayed steady, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was the beginning of something bigger. Alex's breath was steady, his muscles loose but ready. He had been in situations like this before, outnumbered, the odds stacked against him. But this wasn't a battlefield. This wasn't war, at least not the kind he was used to. The man he had pinned moments ago stepped back, rubbing his wrist. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. "Told you," he muttered, just loud enough for Alex to hear. The vehicle's doors slammed shut, and 3 more men stepped into the dim glow of the street lamp. They weren't just random guys. The way they moved, the way they spread out slightly, it was controlled. These men knew what they were doing. They weren't here for a simple fight. Alex shifted his stance subtly, keeping them all in his line of sight. "This is a lot of trouble for one guy," he said, his tone calm. The tallest of the newcomers smirked. "You're not just asterisk one guy asterisk though, are you?" Something about the way he said it made Alex's stomach tighten. There was something more at play here. The leader, because Alex could tell that's who he was, took a slow step forward. "Maddox wanted to see if you were worth the attention," he said. "Looks like you are." Alex's jaw tightened slightly. "I don't know Maddox," he said evenly. The leader tilted his head. "But he knows you." That sent a ripple of unease through Alex. This wasn't just about some random bikers testing him. This wasn't just about standing his ground in a parking lot. Maddox had a reason for watching him, for sending people after him. But why? Alex didn't get time to dwell on it. The leader gave a slight nod, and suddenly, the tension in the air snapped. The first man lunged. Alex reacted instantly, shifting his weight and sidestepping, his arms shooting out to redirect the attack. The man stumbled forward, off balance for just a second, but Alex didn't stop. He twisted, planting a solid strike to the ribs before moving again, keeping himself from being surrounded. But they adapted quickly. The second man was already moving, swinging a fist aimed at Alex's jaw. He blocked it, but the third was right behind, trying to grab him from behind. Alex dropped his weight, twisting free and throwing an elbow into the attacker's side. A grunt of pain, but they didn't back off. They weren't amateurs. They knew how to fight. Which meant this wasn't just a message. They were testing him. Alex's mind raced even as his body moved automatically. If Maddox wanted him taken out, this wouldn't be so controlled. This wasn't about hurting him. It was about asterisk recruiting asterisk him. The realization hit just as the leader stepped in, moving faster than the others. Alex barely dodged in time, but the man wasn't aiming for a single strike. He was measuring, watching, seeing how Alex responded. Then, just as fast as it started, the leader lifted a hand. A signal. The others backed off. Alex stayed ready, breath controlled, waiting. The leader chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah," he said, "you'll do." Alex frowned. For what? The leader studied him for a second before stepping back toward the car. "Maddox doesn't just let people walk away," he said, "but he's not looking to make enemies either." One of the other men cracked his knuckles. "You just proved you're more useful alive than messed up in a ditch." Alex's jaw tightened. Not interested. The leader smirked. "Doesn't really matter what you're interested in." Alex didn't respond. He could still feel the tension, like this could shift into another fight at any second. But then the leader turned, heading for the car. "We'll be in touch," he said over his shoulder. One by one, they climbed back into the vehicle, the engine growling to life. A moment later, they were gone, the night swallowing their presence as if they had never been there. Alex stood there, heart still steady but mind racing. This was bigger than he thought. And it wasn't over. Alex stood in the empty lot long after the taillights had disappeared into the night. His body was still tense, his breathing steady, but his mind was racing. Maddox didn't just know about him, he wanted him, and that was a problem. He needed to end this. The next morning, Alex called Jake. They met at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, but Alex wasn't in the mood to eat. He leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "Maddox wants me in. His people tested me last night." Jake frowned, setting down his coffee. "That's not good." "No kidding." Jake ran a hand over his face. "Maddox doesn't recruit just anyone. If he wants you, it's because he thinks you're valuable." He paused, then looked Alex in the eye. "And if you say no, he'll turn you into a problem that needs to be dealt with." Alex already knew that. Maddox wasn't the kind of guy who took rejection well. He also wasn't the kind of guy who would let someone walk away, knowing too much. Jake exhaled. "You thinking of running?" Alex shook his head. "Not my style." Jake smirked slightly. "Didn't think so." There was a brief silence before Alex leaned in. "I need to get to Maddox first." Jake gave him a long look. "You sure about that?" "It's the only way to end this." Jake sighed. "All right, but if we do this, we do it smart." That night, Alex waited. He knew they'd come back. They had made it clear it wasn't over, and Maddox wasn't the kind of guy to let things sit for too long. He didn't have to wait long. A black SUV pulled up outside his apartment. No motorcycles this time. This wasn't about intimidation anymore. This was business. Alex grabbed his jacket and stepped outside before they could knock. The leader from before was leaning against the vehicle, arms crossed. "Smart," he said. "Saves us the trouble." Alex didn't say anything, just waited. The leader nodded toward the car. "Get in." Alex did. The ride was quiet, tense. The city lights blurred past, and Alex took mental notes of every turn, every landmark. They were headed toward the industrial district, the kind of place where no one asked questions. The car pulled into a warehouse lot, stopping near a set of large metal doors. The men let him inside. The space was massive, filled with crates, motorcycles, and expensive cars. And in the center of it all, sitting casually at a table, was Ray Maddox. Maddox was older than Alex expected, but his presence filled the room. He looked up as they approached, a slow smile spreading across his face. "The Marine," he said, as if he was greeting an old friend. Alex didn't respond. Maddox chuckled. "I have to say, you're an interesting one." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit." Alex did. Maddox studied him for a moment, then leaned forward. "I like people with skills, and you, my friend, have them in spades." Alex met his gaze. "Not interested." Maddox smirked. "See, that's where we have a problem." He gestured vaguely. "I don't like wasting resources." Alex leaned back. "Then maybe you should stop testing people who don't want to be part of this." Maddox's smile didn't fade, but there was something dangerous behind it now. "And maybe you should stop acting like you have a choice." The room went silent. The men around them shifted slightly, waiting. Alex exhaled slowly. "You're right," he said. "I don't have a choice." Maddox raised an eyebrow. Alex continued, "Because I already made mine." Before Maddox could react, the warehouse lights flickered. Then the doors burst open. Jake moved first, fast and efficient, taking out the nearest guard before the others could react. Alex sprang into action, driving an elbow into the man beside him before grabbing his arm and twisting. A gun clattered to the floor. The room erupted into chaos. Maddox stood, eyes wide. Before he could move, Alex was there, slamming him back into the table. "I told you," Alex said, voice low. "I'm not interested." Maddox's men were scrambling, but it was too late. Jake and his team had planned this perfectly. Within moments, the fight was over. Maddox gritted his teeth. "You think this ends with me?" Alex held his gaze. "I think it ends with **U**." Maddox opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the sound of sirens filled the air. Jake smirked from across the room. "Took them long enough." As the police stormed in, Alex stepped back, letting them do their job. Maddox was still glaring at him, but Alex didn't care. It was over. Or so he thought. As he and Jake walked out, Alex's phone buzzed. A message. **** unknown number. ****, you made a big mistake, ****. Alex stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. This wasn't over. Not yet. Alex stared at the message on his phone, the weight of the words settling in his chest. He knew this wouldn't be as simple as taking Maddox down. People like him didn't build empires alone. There were always others, silent figures operating in the background, waiting for the right moment to step in. Jake glanced over. "What is it?" Alex turned the screen toward him. Jake's expression hardened. "Figures," he muttered. Maddox was just a piece of something bigger. Alex nodded, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He wasn't surprised. He had been in the military long enough to know that cutting off the head of the snake didn't always kill it. Sometimes it just made the others more careful. They stood in the parking lot as the police secured the warehouse, holding Maddox and his men into custody. The flashing red and blue lights reflected against the dark pavement, casting eerie shadows around them. Jake sighed. "You could walk away, you know. The cops have enough on Maddox. His operation will take a hit." Alex looked at him, but not disappear. Jake rubbed the back of his neck. "No, it won't." Alex exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He had been a Marine. He had been trained for war, for chaos, for discipline. But this was something else. He hadn't expected to be pulled into a fight like this when he stepped into that bar. He just wanted to shut down some guys harassing people, maybe teach them a lesson. But now it was bigger than that. Jake studied him. "You don't have to keep this going, man. You did your part." Alex looked out at the city. The streets were quiet, as if nothing had happened here. Somewhere out there, whoever sent that message was already planning their next move. He could leave it alone. He could walk away. He had nothing to prove. But that wasn't the kind of person he was. Alex turned back to Jake. "I'm not looking for a fight," he said, "but I'm not running from one either." Jake smirked. "I figured he'd say that." They stood there for a moment before Jake clapped him on the shoulder. "Let's get out of here." Alex nodded, glancing one last time at the warehouse. The police were still moving around, talking, securing evidence. Maddox was done, but the real battle, it was just beginning. The next few days were quiet. Alex kept his routine the same, but his senses were heightened. He paid attention to the cars parked on his street, to the faces he saw more than once. He wasn't being paranoid, he was being prepared. He trained harder, pushing himself in the gym, keeping his skills sharp. If someone was coming, he wasn't going to be caught off guard. But nothing happened. No strange cars, no unknown men following him. Just silence. Jake checked in every now and then, but even he seemed puzzled by the lack of movement. "Maybe they're waiting," he suggested over the phone. "Maybe," Alex said, but he wasn't sure he believed it. Then, a week later, an envelope arrived at his door. There was no return address, no markings, just a simple, unassuming envelope slipped under his door in the middle of the night. Inside was a single note. ****, walk away, ****. Alex read the words twice, then set the note down. His jaw tightened. Whoever was behind this, They were watching. They wanted him to back off. That wasn't happening. He grabbed his phone and called Jake. "We need to talk." Jake met him at a park, away from any places they might be overheard. They sat on a bench, the city moving around them as if nothing was wrong. Alex handed him the note. Jake read it, then let out a slow breath. "They're playing it smart." "They don't want attention," Alex said. Jake nodded. "Exactly. Maddox got sloppy. He liked to throw his weight around. But the people above him? They don't operate like that. They move in the shadows." Alex leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What's the move?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "You could let this go," he said carefully. "Live your life. Pretend none of this happened." Alex gave him a look. Jake sighed. "Yeah, I didn't think you'd go for that." Alex exhaled. "I'm not looking to take down an entire operation, but I'm not just going to pretend this never happened either." Jake nodded. "Then we do this right. No rushing in, no making noise. We learn who's really pulling the strings, and when the time is right," he shrugged, "we make our move." Alex sat back, staring out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the park. He had never planned for any of this. But sometimes life didn't care about plans. He had a choice: walk away and pretend he didn't know what was out there, or step forward, knowing it wouldn't be easy. He already knew his answer. He glanced at Jake. "Let's get to work." Jake grinned. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." As the city lights flickered on around them, Alex felt something settle inside him. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.